Nobody is safe if we allow drilling and fracking for gas from shale in our watershed. If the fracking industry were allowed to advance in our watershed, we will be signing up for devastating and irreversible harm to our water, air, health, economy, and communities. Up to 23 acres of land would be damaged for every well pad, including forests, wetlands, and needed water recharge areas. We would sacrifice billions of gallons of water to this industry. We would be increasing methane in the atmosphere, magnifying the pace and impacts of climate instability, resulting in more floods and droughts for our watershed. Where fracking happens, water wars are real. We do not want them here. We do not want our farmers, our ecotourism business owners, our boaters, our fishers, and everyone who depends upon water, which is frankly all of us, to have to be battling with the frackers for water. But that is what will happen if we allow fracking in our watershed. And that is also what will happen if we allow these regulations to advance as written. Because while they advance the laudable promise of banning fracking, they include the opportunity to bring frack wastewater into our watershed for storage and disposal, and to suck water out of our basin in order to support and induce fracking elsewhere. More fracking anywhere means more toxic wastewater and freshwater needs, which means increased pressure on and use of our watershed to induce fracking that is devastating communities elsewhere. Frankly, this is both an untenable and an immoral stance for the Delaware River watershed to take. Fracking anywhere also means more pipelines and compressor stations and gas export facilities, inflicting more harm on our natural resources and communities, both within the watershed and beyond. Too many have already suffered at the hands of this infrastructure. And so the Delaware Riverkeeper Network supports that portion of the regulatory proposal that bans fracking in the Delaware River watershed. But to be fully acceptable, the Delaware River Basin Commission's regulations must say no entirely to every aspect of the fracking industry, including the wastewater and the water withdrawals, so that we do not allow our watershed to become a sacrifice zone, nor allow our watershed to be used to sacrifice others, including future generations who will be saved or sacrificed by the decisions that we are making today. Thank you.
So I'm Alicia Dorsey, and this is my granddaughter, Katie Dorsey. We're testifying today with hopes that we can achieve a complete and permanent ban on natural gas drilling and fracking and all related activities, including water waste processing and discharge from the water withdrawals from drilling and fracking operations throughout the Delaware River watershed. I, along with others, have been advocating for a fossil-free Philly. The dig for fossil energy is causing major damage to our health when allowing these fracking companies to dump their waste into the Delaware River Basin. A ban on fracking in the Delaware River Basin would limit water pollution. I'm begging you to protect our natural environment and source of life. We need the Delaware River Basin to be fossil waste free, and we are depending on you, our commissioners of Delaware River Basin Commission, to protect our natural resources at the Delaware River Basin. My granddaughter and the rest of my grandchildren, along with the rest of us in Pennsylvania, have a right to clean air and clean water. We have laws to govern the quality of our air and our water, and these laws, along with the moratorium, need to be enforced. After exhaustive studies, the state of New York prohibited fracking based on environmental and public health analysis. The New York Department of Health conducted that. The overall weight of evidence demonstrated that the likelihood that adverse health outcomes and environmental impacts from fracking could not be prevented, leading to the governors to decisions to ban high-volume hydraulic fracking in the state. The state of Maryland also permanently banned fracking after years of study based on potential or adverse public health and environmental impacts. And it's really for my grandchildren that I'm here, because these effects will affect us right now, but it's more or less for the future, my grandchildren and their health and their safety.
Thank you, ma'am.
As a public health physician, I draw your attention to the known and unknown harmful effects introduced from fracking waste. As noted by others, as much as 5 to 10 million gallons of water are laced with 50 to 100 different chemicals, which are used to create fracking fluid. The fracking water, flowback water, not only contains these chemicals, but also brine and highly radioactive materials like radium-226. The risk of a barge or the release of produced water in the Delaware River is simply unthinkable. Yale researchers last year published an article that identified over 1,000 chemicals that use in fracking, of which 76% of the chemicals have not been studied for toxicity. Of the 240 substances that were known to have toxicity, at least 55 of them were carcinogens, 20 were known to increase the risk of leukemia, 43% were known to have reproductive toxicity, 40% developmental toxicity, and 17% affected both the developing fetus or women's reproductive health. Many of these chemicals act as endocrine disruptors, where even nanograms, that is to say 1 part in 1 billion, could block or stimulate the receptor sites that affect fetal growth or our hormonal systems. Because pregnancy is limited to 9 months, we can measure exposure with greater assurance that it was due to fracking and compare it to birth outcomes. 2 reports that were done recently last year showed that the proximity of births near gas wells were associated with neonatal health outcomes. In Texas, they geocoded 159,000 birth records and found a 14% increase in preterm births and fetal deaths. In Pennsylvania, they geocoded 1.1 million babies born proximal to the active gas wells based on the spud date of those wells. And if you lived within 1 kilometer of any of those active wells, you had a 25% increased chance of having low birth weight babies. 2 other studies are worth noting. At Hopkins, Bloomberg School of Public Health, they analyzed 35,000 cases from the Geisinger Health System and found a doubling of active cases, a 40% increase in premature births, and these large numbers all suggest that these are highly statistically significant studies. The fact that actually the state of Pennsylvania or the federal government has not funded any health studies in this country is an abomination. In short, there is a growing evidence that fracking is bad for health. The soon-to-be-released 5th edition of the opinion will show that there are 1,300 peer-reviewed articles on the adverse effects of health of fracking. If you allow fracking for anyone in the Delaware Watershed, you will have committed a public health disaster.
At the outset of this hearing and my testimony, I think it's important to restate the Environmental Rights Amendment of Pennsylvania. The people have a right to clean air, pure water, and to the preservation of the natural, scenic, historic, and aesthetic values of the environment. Pennsylvania's public natural resources are common property of all the people, including generations to come. As trustees of these resources, the Commonwealth shall conserve and maintain them for the benefit of all people. And I think the most important phrase here is including generations yet to come, because I think we in the legislature sometimes forget that when we're crafting legislation. It's not only for the benefit of us, but generations to come. And I'm glad to see that the Pennsylvania Supreme Court is finally taking this provision of the Pennsylvania Constitution seriously. To date, there have been about 11,000 unconventional wells drilled in Pennsylvania. 11,000. There should be places in Pennsylvania where fracking does not occur, and the Delaware River Basin is one of those places. That watershed supplies drinking water to over 15 million people. The Delaware River has been designated a national wild and scenic river by Congress, and it's been afforded special protection water status by the Delaware River Basin Commission. And that's because of the many valuable environmental and economic qualities this river possesses. Drilling is a very highly industrial activity. It can turn pristine forests into industrial sites.
The people that I represent live disproportionately impacted by the entire spectrum of the oil and gas extractive industry, and that must stop. No longer must we bear the burden, people of color and the poor. It must be an outright ban, not just in Delaware River, but across the nation. We are currently under political times where public health and the environment are under assault. This is an even deeper egregious assault called environmental genocide for the folks that we represent. The states can't even handle what the feds are about to put down on them, and they know that. So having additional egregious behaviors is unconscionable. We call upon the moral and courageous moral authority of each and every governor to honor that of Mother Earth and her children. Water is the lifeblood through the mother, and the children who are living disproportionately should not be. So we call, and not only call, we demand as voters, as people of color and the poor, who actually, many of the folks that I represent probably aren't in this room, and some of them are. But what we say, together, we stand for the rights of Mother Earth and her children. And indeed, I leave you with the fact that water is life. Water is sacred. And we will be praying that your moral heart and courage is pricked to stand for the true justice that some folks say this country was created to be. So we call for the human rights of those who left behind, but in addition to that, those standing in privileged spaces right now, holding it down for their properties. Enough is enough. No more will my people bear the burden of discrimination and harm. Right on.